For this lesson, we are going to be reviewing factoring from Algebra 1. This is not teaching you everything, this is just a quick review. So when we solve by factoring, the first step is to set equal to 0. The second step is to factor. And the third step is kind of two things in one, because I think you can do a lot of it in your head, is to write equations and solve. Okay, so on the first group of them, equation 1 is already set equal to 0, so that part is done. Now we need to factor. This one is a binomial. There's a minus sign, and so I can take the square root of both. This is the difference of squares. Okay, so when we factor this, if you remember from Algebra 1, the square root of 16 is 4. Square root of x squared is x, so we have 4x. Square root of 25 is 5, so we have 5 and 5. One's a plus, one's a minus, so now it's factored. Now I can write my two equations, and then I can solve them. Here to solve, I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. So I get 4x equals negative 5, so x is negative 5/4. This one over here is going to give me positive 5/4. Now, this step right here, I think most of you can do in your head, and I'm not going to be writing it out each time, but that's what we're doing. Okay, let's look at number 2. Number 2, we need to set equal to 0. And when we set it equal to 0, we want the x squared to be positive. So since it's positive on the left, I'm going to move everything over to the left. So I'm going to have 9x squared minus 4 equals 0. It's a binomial, it's a minus sign, and I can take the square root of both, so this is the difference of squares. Square root of 9x squared is 3x. Square root of 4 is 2. One's a plus, one's a minus. So when I solve, this over here, I'm going to subtract 2 and divide by 3, so x equals negative 2/3. Over here, I'm going to add 2 and divide by 3, so I'm going to have positive 2/3. Last but not least, got 25x squared equals 36, so set it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 36 from both sides, because I want to keep that x squared positive, so I have 25x squared minus 36 equals 0. It's a binomial. I can take the square root of both, and there's a minus. Square root of 25x squared is 5x. The square root of 36 is 6. One's a plus, one's a minus. So x equals negative 6/5 and positive 6/5. Another way we can write this is x equals plus or minus 5/6. All right, let's look at the next pattern. Now we don't have a binomial, now we have a trinomial, meaning we have 3 terms. And all of these are going to have leading coefficients of 1. So the first thing, set it equal to 0. It is, and now I'm going to factor it. When it's a trinomial with a leading coefficient of that invisible 1, I'm going to go straight to my 2 parentheses. And I need 2 numbers that multiply to 21 and add to 4. Okay, so those 2 numbers, so I'm going to have my x and an x. That's how I get x squared. And then my 2 numbers would be positive 7 and negative 3, because 7 times 3, or 7 times negative 3 is negative 21, and 7 minus 3 is 4. And this equals 0. So when I solve, x plus 7 equals 0, and x minus 3 equals 0. So x equals negative 7 and 3. Again, this step, not going to necessarily write. Okay, let's look at number 5. I'm going to set it equal to 0. So I've got x squared minus 2x minus 15 equals 0. It's a trinomial with a leading coefficient of 1, so I'm going to go straight to my 2 parentheses. 2 numbers that multiply to negative 15. So they multiply to this, and add to negative 2 would be negative 5 and positive 3. If I flip that, they would still multiply to negative 5, but they would add to positive 2, and that's not what I want. So when I solve, x equals positive 5 and negative 3. On the next one, set it equal to 0. Now when you set it equal to 0, you need it to be x squared x and then a number. So when I do the minus 8x, it has to go here and then the positive 12. If it's not in the right order, it can mess you up. Okay, two numbers that multiply to 12 and add to negative 8 would be, well, if they multiply to a positive, they got to be the same sign. So I'm going to have a negative 6 and negative 2. So when I solve, x equals 6 and 2. All right, let's try these. These don't fit a oops. We need to put an x in here. I was missing an x. Add that back in. Okay, these don't fit a pattern. These are just simplifying. So it's set equal to 0. There's always some factoring I can do, and the factoring I can do on this one is x. So I'm going to take out an x, and I'm left with x minus 10 equals 0. So either x equals 0 or x minus 10 equals 0. Well, this is already solved. This one gives me x is 10. All right, let's try this again. On number 8, I got to set it equal to 0, and I need my x squared positive. So I'm going to have x squared plus 5x equals 0. The greatest common factor is x. I'm going to take that out. So I get x is 0, or x plus 5 is 0. So on this one, I get x is negative 5. So these are my two answers. Okay, let's see what happens on number 9. I got to set it equal to 0, but when I set it equal to 0, I need the x squared to be positive. So it's negative right now, so I need to move it to the other side. So this is going to the other side and that. Now I've got to do x squared, x, and then a number. So now it's going to be positive 2x squared minus 18x. They change signs because they're moved to the other side. But the 40 is on the right side, so it just remains positive 40. Whoops. Technically now, since I moved it to the right, I just have 0 on the left. Okay, so when I go to factor these, oh, that's not something we've done before, but there is a greatest common factor on this one. I can take out the 2, and I've got x squared minus 9x plus 20. Now in the parentheses, I have a trinomial with a leading coefficient of 1. So I need two numbers that multiply to 20 and add to negative 9. So I'd have negative 5 and negative 4. So when I solve, technically, I have 2 equals 0, x minus 5 equals 0, and x minus 4 equals 0. Well, 2 cannot equal 0. That's not a solution. So I just get x is 5 and 4. All right, a few more. On this one, it's already set equal to 0, but unfortunately there's no greatest common factor. So to solve these, we're going to split the middle term. Okay, so to split the middle term, I'm going to take the first number times the last. So 2 times 30 is 60. Now I need two numbers that multiply to 60 and add to negative 16. Negative 17. So I can do what? Well, 6 and 10 would add to negative 16. That doesn't work. But 12 and 5 do. I could do negative 12 and negative 5. And that would give me positive 60. And that would also give me negative 17. So now I'm going to rewrite it, splitting the middle term. So instead of negative 17, I'm going to rewrite it to negative 12x and negative 5x plus 30 equals 0. Now I'm going to factor my grouping. I can take a 2x out of the first one, and I'm left with x minus 6. Out of the next two, I can take out a negative 5, and if this term is negative, I always want to take out a negative. I take it out of negative 5. So negative 5x divided by negative 5 is positive x, and positive 30 divided by negative 5 is negative 6 equals 0. Now when I rewrite this, these both match, so I'm going to make a parentheses for what matches, and then I'm going to make a new parentheses with what they split. So my next parentheses is 2x minus 5, and this equals 0. So when I solve, x plus 6 equals 0, or 2x minus 5 equals 0. This gives me x equals negative 6. This one I'm going to add the 5 and divide by 2. So I get 5 halves. All right, let's try this again. First, we got to set it equal to 0 and make the x squared positive. So both these have to move over. So the x squared stays here, and I get minus 3x and minus 2 equals 0. So now I'm going to split the middle term. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. Two numbers that multiply to negative 10 and add to negative 3 would be negative 5 and positive 2. So now I'm going to rewrite that, splitting the middle term into negative 5x and positive 2x. So the first two terms, I can take out 5x, and I'm left with x minus 1. Out of the next two terms, I can take out 2, and I'm left with x minus 1. So when I rewrite this, I get x minus 1 times 5x plus 2. This one, when I solve, I get 1, and this one I get negative 2/5. All right, one more. Set it equal to 0. So I get 6x squared minus 11x minus 7 equals 0. So first I'm going to take 6 times negative 7, which is negative 42. So I need two numbers that multiply to negative 42 and add to negative 11. Well, 6 and 7 won't work, but negative 14 and 3 will. So now I'm going to rewrite it as 6x squared minus 14x plus 3x minus 7 equals 0. Out of the first two terms, I can take out a 2x, and I'm left with 3x minus 7. The next two terms don't have anything to factor out, but I always have to factor something out. So I'm going to take out a 1, and I'm left with 3x minus 7 equals 0. So now I can rewrite this as 3x minus 7 times 2x plus 1 equals 0. So when I solve, this I'm going to add 7 and divide by 3, so I get 7/3. This I'm going to subtract 1 and divide by 2, so I get negative 1/2. And there's my answer.